It's 5 p.m. here in Lagos, Nigeria, and the final edition of The World Today for this week. I'm Joke Rogers, and we begin with the latest developments in South Korea, where there are fears of a declaration of a second martial law. This is coming from South Korea's civic group of military human rights, which claims to have detected suspicious circumstances for the declaration of the second law. According to the head of the Center for Military Human Rights Korea, Lim Tae-hun, several army units have been ordered to wait for an emergency call for the day after the impeachment vote on President Yoon Suk-yeol. Meanwhile, the South Korea's Vice Defense Minister Kim Song-ho says the ministry will not obey any order regarding the implementation of another martial law, indicating such reports were not true. South Korea's National Assembly Speaker has also vowed to make an all-out effort to prevent martial law in case President Yoon declares it again. While demonstrations are continuing in the country to kick against a martial law, as hundreds gather outside the country's National Assembly demanding the arrest of President Yoon Suk-yeol. Protests were also seen inside the National Assembly, where opposition lawmakers converged, chanting slogans to arrest the president. Fearing another attempt to declare martial law, opposition lawmakers rotated through Parliament's plenary session hall today to block any such attempt. A motion had been submitted by the main opposition Democratic Party to impeach President Yoon, and a vote scheduled in Parliament for Saturday evening. The opposition have a majority in the 300-seat Parliament, but need the support of at least 8 ruling party MPs to secure the 200 votes required for the impeachment motion to pass. In the meantime, while the South Korean leader faces an impeachment motion, the police, on the other hand, say they are investigating claims of treason against him and top ministers. The president also ordered the arrest of his own ruling party's leader, Han Dong-hun, when he declared martial law on Tuesday night. According to the National Intelligence Service, the arrest list also includes the leader of the main opposition Democratic Party, Lee Jae-myung, as well as 3 opposition lawmakers. Officials believe that the president tried to use those arrests to wipe them out after he gave the military sweeping emergency powers on Tuesday to root out what he calls anti-state forces and overcome obstructionist political opponents. Let's unravel all of this now. Joining us on the program is Professor David Awurawo, Professor of History and Strategic Studies at the University of Lagos. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Right, so let's begin with the historical and political factors that have led to the imposition of martial law in South Korea. What role have external factors such as North Korea's military activities played in this?
Yeah, martial law is not new in South Korea. Since South Korea became a democratic state since 1948, we have had like 16 martial law declared. But the last one was as far back as 1980, 44 years ago. Since then, South Korea has expanded. Democratic values have been intensified. Human rights are valued. Corruption is opposed. So that is the context in South Korea. But the immediate conditions were the elections that held in April, in which the party of Yoon lost scandalously, and the Democratic Party, did very well, swept the polls. And so effectively, since that April this year, President Yoon has become a lame dog because the opposition party controls parliament and, are able to shape the course of governance. So he's frustrated with, his lack of powers, and of course made this huge mistake of going to declare martial law on Tuesday. So that is the background to the current situation in South Korea.
And how will this impact regional dynamics, particularly with regard to North Korea and China?
Well, North Korea and China are not particularly democratic. I'm sure they will be surprised in those places because something like martial law was not something that was expected that would take place in South Korea at this time. South Korea is held as, the genuinely democratic state in that region, along with Japan. Of course, we know that North Korea is authoritarian extremely. The dictatorship there is one of the worst in the world. China, of course, we also know that human rights are not so respected there, and their own kind of democracy, of course. They don't even refer to it as democracy as such. But, so South Korea is more like the liberal, along with Japan, the most liberal of the countries in that region. And so I'm sure that people will be surprised in North Korea and China that a martial law, was declared on Tuesday in South Korea, and maybe they will be happy that people want to condemn them will not have the moral standing to be able to condemn them for being undemocratic. When South Korea, that is held as the democratic example, along with Japan in that region, is declaring martial law.
Right, and we've seen a lot of protests, against it, candle vigil, since President Yoon made that declaration on Tuesday. Many wonder what specific provisions are included in the martial law and how, they will impact civil liberties and daily life in South Korea.
Martial law is effectively military rule, just with the president being in charge. Martial law means the military will take charge. They will be able to use maximum force to quell protests. They will set aside people's rights. The last one that happened in 1980, 200 died. Some even say that maybe up to 300, 400, that the official figure of 200 is too small. That tells you, what happens when there is martial law. The military come into the picture, they take charge, and people's rights are, violated. They are usually high-handed, as we saw, on Tuesday after the declaration. The only difference in this was that the media was respected. People were filming, people were able to cover the whole thing live. There wasn't so much attempt to stop that from happening. But generally, that's what martial law means. And it has happened several times in South Korea. It always follows that pattern of extreme violation of rights and maximum force to quell protest. Of course, North Koreans are to be commended for coming out, despite the fact that they were conscious of what the consequences would be in terms of bodily harm to them, but they still came out all this and their democracy and their rights.
Right, because you said everything was peaceful. People came out, conscious of what could happen. But be that as it may, are there any concerns about potential human rights abuses or excessive use of force by security personnel? The protests are just coming; they're peaceful as yet. But do you think it could take a turn for the worse?
Yeah, the military has been a bit restrained compared to earlier examples of such declaration. They've used force, but not as extensively as we had in previous experiences of martial law declaration in South Korea. They've been a bit careful. They've not been too harsh, and they've not used violence maximally, as normally is the case when martial law is declared. And like I said before, journalists who have tried to cover the event, the usual attempt to beat them up and harm them. Not much of that has happened at this time. But there are concerns all the same because we are in a step called martial law. If Yoon goes that way, he will just show himself to be very foolish because we can see the handwriting on the wall. If I were him, I would just resign. He would likely be impeached. In fact, in 2017, when Park was impeached and then was tried, it was just for something not so serious, so to speak, that a friend was advising her who was not official, and maybe there were some corrupt activities here and there. There were not things directly, she was directly involved in terms of taking money for herself. where she was impeached and then jailed. So Yoon, if I were him, I would just resign and go. So it should not go the way of another martial law. You should just allow things to, quietly fizzle out while the political issues are sorted out in the days ahead.
And let's talk about the impact on society and, bilateral relations. How might this affect South Korea's relationship with some other countries, particularly those within the same region?
Well, depending on the country, actually, for China and some other countries, there won't be much problem, especially as they are used to that kind of thing, maximum use of force, quelling protests and all that. China and some other countries around are used to that. But Japan, that shares democratic values the same with South Korea, will be concerned, and it will likely affect, relations. With the West, yes, relations also will be affected, but it depends on how these things are resolved, actually. If Yoon is impeached and democratic processes are carried to a logical conclusion, and then a new president comes in that oppose those values, there won't be any much problem. In the short run, yeah, there will be frosty relations while all of these political issues are resolved. So it depends on how these things are sorted out in the next few days, few weeks. If they follow constitutional provisions and Yoon gives way, another person comes in and democratic values are upheld, there won't be much problem. But of course, it depends on the country. Countries that are authoritarian won't have any problem. But those ones that uphold democratic values and human rights, of course, they will have issues. But hopefully, they will be able to sort it out and return to where they were before now, upholding democratic values, defending freedom and human rights. And for the South Koreans, they are to be commended. This will embolden them more, that nothing will stop them from moving ahead with defending their rights and ensuring that they are governed through democratic values. Because this is like a triumph for them. They started protesting and then parliament came in, and within less than 24 hours, the martial law was set aside, which is why we are where we are now. But the fear of that second declaration of martial law is what is there. But we hope that won't happen, so that stability can be restored in the next few days.
Right. And how long is martial law expected to remain in place?
Well, the martial law was declared by the president. It took almost everybody by surprise, including members of parliament. In fact, when they were coming into parliament, some had to even climb walls and all that to find their way there to get the votes they needed, to be able to set aside the martial law. And of course, the president respected the parliamentary decision and came ahead and announced the thing being set aside. So, that's the process. The president can just come around and say, because it's there in the constitution, actually, that if the country is being threatened by war or some other things that would affect national stability, there could be martial law. But in this context, there was nothing like that. It was just a case of, an individual whose grip on power is slipping away, and things that perhaps martial law will help him to be able to maintain a grip on power. Those are the issues. Those things that the Constitution provides for which martial law can be declared. We are not there in South Korea, which is why it was very easy for the opposition to come in. Parliament moves and then decided that the martial law will be of no effect. And of course, the president respected that by saying that it had been set aside. Like I said before, hopefully in the next few days they will be able to sort out the rest of the issues, and then stability can be restored to South Korea.
Right. Professor David Awarawa, Professor of History and Strategic Studies, thank you so much for joining us on the program and for expanding the discussion of the political situation in South Korea.
Thanks so very much. Have a nice evening.
Well, if you're just joining us, a quick reminder of our top story, which you just heard about. We've been tracking the martial law declaration in South Korea, which has sparked widespread outrage and, of course, protests, with many calling for President Yoon's resignation or impeachment. The opposition Democratic Party has put forward a bill calling for Mr. Yoon's impeachment, which could lead to significant political instability. On Tuesday, President Yoon made a martial law declaration, which led to opposition to preside over an emergency vote to remove the measure, President Yoon emerged a few hours to accept the Parliament's vote and lift the martial law order. Well, there is a lot to unpack when it comes to this conversation. As we continue it, joining us now in our Lagos studio is Chukwuemeka, is a lecturer, Faculty of Law, Prime University in Abuja. Came all the way just to join us. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. We're still talking about South Korea. You know, what do you think? You know, Professor Awarawa said a lot of things. So what do you think would be the president's exit strategy should everything go south?
I cannot read this mind, but there are possibilities. Looking at the past, previous leaders of South Korea, I think in his own case, his party is currently opposed to him. So the People's Power Party, they are opposed to him now. Initially, they said they won't allow him to go. But having discovered yesterday that he included even the leader of his own party to be arrested, they are now ready to let him go. And since their constitution requires 2/3 of the total number of members of parliament to pass a resolution impeaching him, and the opposition Liberal Democratic Party has 192 members, and they need 8 members from the ruling party. The way the mind of the ruling party is now, there is hope that these 8 members will be gotten to join the Democratic Party to impeach him. But it doesn't stop there. The Constitutional Court that will put a final imprimatur on that resolution, there are supposed to be 9 members. There are 3 vacancies, and we have 6 now. 6 of them must accept that the resolution should stand. And as there are 6 now, it means that the whole 6 must accept. It must be unanimous, because we cannot, between now and Saturday, that's tomorrow, swear in 3 other justices to make up the 9. So you were asking me about exit strategy. He will either live with the remaining tatters of his dignity,
Yes.
or he will remain and be disgraced. And what may happen to him, thank God that Japan has a boundary with South Korea. And remember, Japan, even during the Second World War, they occupied South Korea. There is a Japanese term called seppuku, a political harakiri. So Yoon Suk Yeol, if he does not take time, may end up committing political harakiri or political seppuku, which means political suicide.
Right.
In Japan. That's Japanese language.
Right. And, you know, we were talking earlier, and you said you probably don't know what's going through his mind for possible exit strategy. But, you know, what led to all this? Give us a breakdown of what, you know, martial law is all about, and why a president such like, you know, in South Korea would actually, you know, think of imposing it in the first place, or declaring it.
Yes. It's an exception to the alliance with the maxim Salus Populis Suprema Lex. The safety of the people is the supreme law. And if suspending civil liberties will help to safeguard the people, then let it be so. Because sometimes you need extraordinary measures to handle extraordinary situations. If you look at our own situation, we have what we call state of emergency in section 305 of our 1999 Constitution. In their own terminology, it is martial law. So it is a situation where there is a state of war, a breakdown of law and order that requires extraordinary measures, when you have clear and present danger, it may be actual danger, it may be clear and present danger. In such situations, there is need to safeguard the people. So the safety of the people is the supreme law. So if it is declaring a situation whereby civil liberties, fundamental human rights will be suspended so that the majority of the people be saved instead of not doing anything and losing majority of the people. That is the philosophy behind declaration of martial law.
And what, would have been the immediate social and the economic impact in South Korea, its effects on the people that, the president could have been trying to protect, their businesses, their social life, education, medicals, so many things that affect people. What immediate impact would this have?
Yes, I gave you the broad position, but in this circumstance, contextually, this president was selfish, self-conceited, and was never interested in safeguarding the lives of the people, but his own political power. I think his power game. So a man that since April had been shortchanged democratically by the opposition, refusing to do his gimmicks. He has been wanting certain things done through the budget and otherwise, and the opposition has been standing in his way. So and remember, as of January, his popularity rating was 24%. Recently, before the declaration, it came to 19, from 19 to 17. As of yesterday, I learned it's 13. It can plummet to 7 up to 2%. 0. And that he will be one of the worst when counted along like Park Geun-hye, who had similar issue, not of this type. This one is reasonable, allegedly, in 2016 and was subjected to impeachment proceedings and ended up taking 20 years imprisonment for corruption, but was pardoned later by later government.
Well, thank you for your time. Chukwuemeka is a lecturer, Faculty of Law, Prime University, Abuja. Thank you for coming all the way.
Thank you.
For discussing this with us. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.